Are you tired of fishing the same baits as everyone else in your local lake? Well, in this video, we're going to share 3 unique baits that other anglers on your fishery are probably not throwing. These will give you an advantage next time you go to the lake to put bigger winter bass in the boat. Let's get into it.
What is up, guys? Hey, before we get into these weird winter baits, as you see right here, and as you're going to see Johnny and Miles go into their bait that they like to use during the winter that's just a little different, I'm going to say a big shout out to Bridgeford Food Corporation. Hey, Bridgeford's is a very, very proud sponsor of the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel, and we could not continue to put out 2 to 3 videos a week without the support from Bridgeford Foods. Hey, for a guy like me, I love to have some food in the boat. I'm going to have my gallon of water I'm going to drink, and I'm also going to have some snacks. And who does not like to eat beef jerky while they're out fishing? Hey, real quick, if you would like a free case of beef jerky, as you see right here, the sweet baby raised beef jerky, hey, leave us a comment today after you watch this video of your favorite lure or tip that one of the guys from the video shared. We will announce the winner in the Friday video segment, so make sure you go back to watch the Friday video to hear the announcement on the winner. Hey, once again, thank you for Bridgeford Foods. Don't forget to leave that comment. Now let's go hear about what Johnny says about his favorite unique winter bait.
For my bait, I'm going to talk about a secret lure that is pretty well known among the best tournament anglers in my region of the country, but is not very popular among the general population of fishermen, and that is a small 1/8 ounce hair jig. Whenever you're fishing on highland reservoirs in the wintertime and you want to fish for lethargic suspended bass, whether that's offshore or against some steeper bluffy banks, a little 1/8 ounce hair jig is an absolutely deadly technique. A lot of guys throw these marabou style or synthetic hair jigs up north for smallmouth, and if you've watched any smallmouth tournaments, you'll see guys fishing them up in shallower water and sometimes even deeper for smallmouth bass. However, I actually throw these for spotted bass and largemouth on highland reservoirs down in the south with great results. The thing about these 1/8 ounce synthetic hair jigs is that they have a very nice subtle fall and a very natural glide through the water when you look at them underwater. It has a lot more natural of an action than just like, let's say, a standard jig or like a shaky head worm or a Ned rig. And I just feel like it's something that the bass are not seeing on a day-to-day basis. Now, in terms of where you fish these hair jigs, you can basically throw them in the same exact areas you throw a Ned rig, a finesse swim bait, a shaky head, sometimes even a jerk bait, and you can let that bait just kind of glide through the middle of the water column for those suspended bass. It's a very versatile lure, and you can actually even fish it as deep as 30 or 40 feet of water if you're very patient. It's such a well-rounded lure that honestly you could throw this pretty much all day in any situation you'll find yourself in, as long as you have pretty clear water on your fishery. I would say 3 to 4 feet of water visibility, and you're on a highland reservoir with steeper banks. This bait isn't as good on lowland reservoirs or dirty water conditions. You definitely need that clear water, but it catches all 3 species and is absolutely deadly. The challenge with this bait is that it's very light. It's an 1/8 of an ounce, but I'm going to show you a modification with this bait that allows you to cast it further and actually get more bites, as well as the equipment I'm throwing. And this is a secret that I'm definitely letting out of the bag, but I'm going to show you guys anyways. Hopefully you enjoy. So here's a closer look at the hair jig I'm using. It's the Andes Edwin Evers E-Series synthetic hair jig. It is an 1/8 ounce black hair jig that has pretty long strands to it. It's one of the longer stranded hair jigs in this 1/8 ounce size that you can find in the market. I'll link it down in the description below. And I like to have that a little bit longer size because when that bait gets wet, it does really compress down, but having this nice amount of synthetic hair gives it still a pretty good profile even when wet. The problem again with this little 1/8 ounce hair jig though is casting it on a spinning rod, especially if you want to fish it deeper and want to make a long cast, let's say a 30 or 40 yard cast. The way I get around that is by actually putting a chunk of Senko on the back of the hair jig. So right there, that's just a little tiny chunk of Gary Yamamoto Senko, and this is just a black, blue, and gold color that I really like for fishing dirty water when I'm fishing cypress trees and stuff, and I just use it for this black hair jig as well. You can use any color you want, but all I basically do is just cut off a small chunk of the tail on a Senko, and I'm going to thread that onto that hair jig like so. The reason I'm doing this is to make it a little bit easier to cast while not adjusting the weight too much. They do make an 1/8 ounce and a 1/4 ounce size in this hair jig, so you could go to the 1/4 ounce if you want, but you're going to have a lot faster fall, and it's going to kind of defeat the purpose of this hair jig because you want that slow, very subtle glide to it. So an 1/8 ounce hair jig is pretty much mandatory for the way I fish it, especially if you're up in shallower water. But by adding that Senko, you're not adding a ton of weight to the head, so it doesn't fall that much faster, but you can cast it a lot further. It cuts through the water a lot better, and it casts basically like a Ned rig then, and it's kind of that combination of a Ned rig with the synthetic hair, and also it kind of shapes that hair a little bit more as well. You don't want that tail to be super long, like sticking out way to the end of the jig. You want it to still be contained within that skirt, so when the hair compresses down, you barely see that chunk of Senko, and it just kind of blends in with the hair, but that's kind of the look, and you can cast it a lot further that way. Another thing that helps casting this bait is having the right setup and the equipment to use this jig. The rod I like to use is the Denali KOVERT Lite 6'10" medium power fast action spinning rod. 6'10" is a good enough length that you can cast that bait really well, but the medium power allows you to handle that lighter jig a little bit better. One of my favorite offshore rods is the Denali KOVERT series in the 7'2" medium heavy. That's a little bit too much power for the rod, and it's a little bit too much rod for this little hair jig. So a 6'10" rod works really well for me. And I'm just gonna be pairing that with a 12-pound Sunline braided line as my main line, and then a 30 to 40 foot leader of 6-pound Sunline FC Sniper Fluorocarbon. For my reel, I'm going to be using the new Denali Fission reel that they sent me. These are a brand new reel that they came out with, and you guys know I'm working with Denali, and they wanted me to test out these new reels. They said, stop buying all your reels at Walmart, try out this one. So I did, and it's incredible using a reel that costs more than $30 because it casts this hair jig really well. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using super high dollar reels all the time, but when you do have a really light bait like this and you want to have a high quality reel to cast it further, it can make a big difference. So shout out to Denali for making a good reel like this. There's other reels in the market too that are really high quality as well. So I'll link this down below, but if you have any high quality spinning reels as well, I'm sure they'll also do the job. So that is my setup here, and that is one of the sneakiest little baits that you're going to find in the winter time on these highland reservoirs.
All right, everybody, as far as wintertime baits that just don't get a lot of attention and not a lot of people are throwing, I think this one right here is probably one of the most effective that honestly, I never really started throwing it until I moved here to the TVA on Lake Chickamauga. This right here is a blade bait. This one right here is actually the original Silver Buddy. Okay, so it's essentially a nose-weighted, nose and belly-weighted bait that is constructed of thin metal on the rest of the body. So essentially what this bait is designed to do is it's designed to have a very similar action as a lipless crankbait, a very tight wobble in general. Now you have different options. Some of them have different, line tie positions where you can manipulate the type of vibration you're going to get from very tight to very wide. And some just have, one option like the Silver Buddy does. But this is a bait that is very, very versatile, and it's something that's a little bit different. We all know that lipless crankbaits during the coldest months, winter and pre-spawn, are one of the most effective baits out there. But the Silver Buddy does something a little bit different. These blade baits offer extreme flash. Okay, you can see because it's just made of metal. It's like super chrome. It has a ton of flash, it has a lot of vibration, but one thing it doesn't have is the sound factor. It doesn't have it doesn't have rattles at all. So those fish that are conditioned to avoiding lipless crankbaits because of that extra sound, they will attack this bait like crazy. They'll absolutely choke it. So as far as fishing these blade baits and the Silver Buddies, really, you pick how you like to fish them. I personally, fishing the TVA, I like to fish it up shallow, just like a lipless crankbait. So like in 2 foot of water around the last remaining grass, I'm essentially casting it out and reeling it back in, either with a steady retrieve or kind of a stop and go retrieve, where I'll just stop the reel for a second, let it fall down into the grass, and then rip it out. It does a really good job of ripping through that grass. And again, it just shows the fish something completely different, a little bit more flash, less sound, and still a ton of vibration. So you can fish it shallow, or you can go out deep as well. You can yo-yo this out in deeper water for fish that are, you know, relating sort of to the bottom or maybe a little bit suspended. There's a lot of different things you can do with this bait, because, you know, it can go to pretty much any depth range. Now, one thing I will mention is about the different line type positions you're going to see on a lot of them. This right here is the 6 Sense Slicer. This has 3 different hole positions that you can choose from. The front one is going to have the most, tightest vibration. It's going to be really good for horizontal presentations up shallow. The middle one is kind of where I stay the majority of the time. It's just a good, happy medium. And I like to fish it shallow, mid depths, you know, that sort of thing. And then the hole closest to the tail, that one is going to be best for your deep water situations where you want that nice, consistent, heavy vibration as you're yo-yoing it off the bottom. So that's kind of a brief explanation of the different line type positions. As far as tackle goes, I like to use the same setup that I use with my lipless crankbaits. I use a 7.3 medium heavy Versa series rod from Fitzgerald. You can go down to like a medium 7.3 if you want a lighter rod if you're not fishing around grass. But because I like to fish around grass here on the TVA, I like a heavier rod with a little bit more backbone. As far as line goes, I use fluorocarbon exclusively with these baits. I like 12 and 15 pound tests, red label fluorocarbon, okay? I like the 12 if I'm trying to get deeper, the 15 for everything else. You know, I like fishing the 15, especially up shallow around grass. And then as far as the reel, keep it simple, keep it, moderate speed gear ratio, something in a 7.2 to 1 gear ratio. This one right here, I like using the VLD 10. And that just seems to work very, very well. I don't want a reel that's super fast, and I definitely don't want one that is super slow either. So anyways, guys, these blade baits right here are a bait category that definitely is not talked about that much, but are as legit as they come.
All right, guys, I'm going to share with you a weird winter lure that, man, catches fish. And it doesn't just catch fish in the winter, it catches fish all year long. And I'm going to share the story of kind of how I got introduced to this lure. It was not something that I myself got brought, just found out on my own. I got shared about it, so I'm going to have to share some of that information. But first, let's talk about the lure. It's a tail spinner, as you see right here. And I'm going to share a link in the description with a few different style of tail spinners. But right here is you have a little bodied bait, small. And then you're going to have a little tail with a blade and then a hook. Now this one here is a unique one, okay? It's kind of a custom one. They're kind of hard to find. I've found them in local tackle shops, but I'm going to share some links of some baits that are on Tackle Warehouse you can get, such as the Little George is a very popular one. And so at times when I tell people I'm catching on the Little George, it's actually this guy, okay? So this tail spinner. Now, how I got brought about the tail spinner was actually at Toledo Bend 2 years ago. And my guy that took me down there, Michael Howard, man, great fisherman, great friend, mentor of mine. And Michael brought me down there to fish with a very, very popular angler on Toledo Bend. His name's Glenn Freeman. You can Google Glenn Freeman. There's YouTube videos on Glenn Freeman. He has been fishing Toledo Bend, guys, longer than probably a lot of y'all have been alive that's watching this video. And when Glenn brought this lure up and started fishing it, I'm over like, what are we doing? We're at Toledo Bend. I mean, big bass lake, very popular lake, and we're about to throw this little guy. He went to work with it. And then eventually I caught fish with it, figured it out. And since then I've taken it with me back home and in other lakes as well. And even in a recent fishing trip, it was just a couple weeks ago, I was down at Lake O'Pines chasing fish on the live scope. I could not get them to bite a giant bait, normal bait. I lost one good 5-6 pound fish, but I caught a bunch of 2 pound fish with this guy. And that was probably because the bait that they were chasing was tiny. And another fishing trip, for example, this was a summer trip, Lake Fork. Once again, another lowland reservoir, very popular lake, big fish factory, as you all guys know, and also it's a hard place to fish. There was one evening where we caught a bunch of 3 to 4 pound fish, had a pretty good bag and a good day, you know, right? I mean, but our biggest fish of the day, which was right over 5 pounds, came off of this little guy, okay? So with this little dude, I mean, like I said, you've probably seen people talk about him or, you know, seen him advertised, and they're not a joke. But for the winter, it's one of those lures that, you know, there are bass that are chasing very, very small bait. And what this lure does is, you know, when it's going down, it's kind of like a spoon. You know, this is just another tool if you like to drop spoons and vertical fish. You cast this guy out and it's going to drop, and then you're going to hop it, bring it up, and then when it comes down, and this little dude just replicates a dying small bait fish. And this little blade action just kind of, you know, if those bass are really, really focused on them small bait, this right here will just kind of get them, kind of get their attention, and you can be able to catch these fish. I know one other trip that, this was in the spring, and me and Johnny fished together down here on one of the lakes, Lake Greason, as some of you guys know, which can be a very hard place to fish at times. A lot of fish, small fish, right? There are some good ones in there, as some guys know, but Johnny was just decided to start doing his offshore thing, right? Going idling in the middle of creeks out there in 40, 50 foot. He found some fish and said, hey, we're about to catch these on a hair jig. And I pulled this dude out and outfished him with it. Didn't catch any giants, okay? But Johnny gave me that look like, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, this is just, you know, my little quiet little deal. So guys, hey, don't forget about the tail spinner. It's a unique winter bait, but you can catch fish with it all year long. Hey, my rod that I use, okay, and I have a 6.6 medium action rod. I think a 7-foot rod will be fine as well. That Denali Rkyer series has a 6.6 medium action that I'd recommend. I do not have a very expensive rod for this lure, since it is, you know, something unique. It's like I said, it's not my first choice that I throw. It is on the deck, okay? I'm going to have this on the deck or back here in the back part of my boat. It's there when needed. So I'm not going to have a big time expensive rod. Man, your gear ratio reel, hey, 6'4", 6'3", you know, anywhere in that six gear ratio size. You don't need something too fast or too slow. Line, you know, hey, I mean, fluorocarbon line, you can go anywhere from 12 to 16 pound, depending where you're fishing. I know because at times when we're fishing down at Toledo Bend or where I'm fishing Lake Fork, we're catching fish in timber with this. So it's not like it's just an open water lure. You can fish within timber. I like to throw it around rocks, timber. I'll throw it above brush piles. I'm not scared. So hey, tail spinner, something unique. Don't forget about it. Go give it a shot.
And that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our unique baits and learned something new that you can take to the lake this winter. Let us know down in the comments what your favorite bait was that was shared, and also make sure to subscribe to the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our future uploads. Thanks for checking out this video. We'll see y'all next one.